Welcome back to Horses of Courses. I'm Tinia.
I'm Suzanna.
And this is episode 5. We are podcasting from Canmer, Kentucky at Suzanna's house.
Yay!
We have a heck of a view. We can see her pond down there. We've got birds in the background. It's a nice rainy day. And we are going to jump right into our next event coming up. We don't really have a super busy summer because the ATFO is in August. And once April wraps up, we kind of have a lull.
I don't think it's going to wind up being that way.
It's never a real lull.
It's never a real lull.
So Susanna got a call that has fleshed out into what I think is an interesting idea. So tell them, Susanna, about the call and the backstory to what I think is going to be kind of an event.
So there's a Mustang mainly trainer that's near Lexington, Kentucky, who has actually worked with one of our past horses. And she went to the chiropractor and had an adjustment, and it caused her to have a stroke. So now she's got an upper level I think he's half Andalusian, maybe 9-year-old stallion that she just can't work with because that happened to her. And she's followed Hop for quite some time and said, is there any way that you guys can take him? Because I know you have lots of trainers with feral experience. He's beautiful. If I advertise him, everybody on the planet is going to be wanting to take him home, but he's going to be too much for most people. And I'm afraid that if I rehome him that way, he's going to end up in the pipeline somehow.
So, well, and I want to kind of clarify, when we say pipeline, we don't really mean the slaughter pipeline. Only 19 to 21,000 horses go to slaughter. For us, more the pipeline is a track to something bad, whatever that could mean. And with her saying the chiropractor and the stroke, we don't know if that's what caused it. That's the story from us. Chiropractor and then a stroke. And so all the way around, super sad story. But we got to thinking, we've heard some stories lately. There was a pretty devastating story in another state where an organization didn't have experience with ferals, even though they had a lot of horse experience. And there's such a disconnect between a handled horse and what can be done and what can be done with a feral horse. And so there was a real tragedy happened in another state, and just from lack of education and lack of resources. And that's not the first time. And we've had horses go out with trainers that really are capable horse people that really, really, really struggle with the feral horse. And then these horses kind of languish or they get mishandled. So to us, it's a mishandling, even if the horse is not getting the care it needs because it's feral. And it's mishandling if bad things are being taught to the horse because you don't know, and you're kind of strong-arming the animal when it's not necessary and creating trauma. So in that vein, because we do have so many trainers, and a select few specifically that are incredible with feral horses. Nelson Detweiler is one, Dixie Marisi is another, and her mother Morgan. They've kind of been our core team, and of course Susanna and I have learned an incredible amount along the way. So we thought, what if we developed a series of videos and potentially a series of in-person events across America, starting with this horse in Kentucky, that gives people the information they need to start gentling feral horses effectively and humanely. It's something that we have pitched now to the ASPCA lightly, and there is some interest in funding it. And the thing about us is we're going to do it anyway. So if there's funding that makes it easier for us, then that's great. It would allow us to make it more of an in-person opportunity and allow us to go more places in the country. But what we're thinking is we will start in, probably will ultimately be the beginning of June with this stallion in Kentucky, but potentially maybe host something out in Florida, something maybe up toward New England, and then maybe something out in California. So just look for that. It's not, something that has a hard and fast date, but I think it's so needed, and I do think we are uniquely the right people to do it. Moving on. We have had a hot, rainy spring. And what comes out of hot, rainy springs? Do you know, Suzanna?
Mud puddles.
Mites and lice. Mites and lice. When I used to raise dairy goats, I always knew, like when the winter was wet and muggy, I'm like, oh no, we're going to have mites and lice. And I think a lot of people haven't ran into it. Unlike some species, in horses, you really tend to see it in disadvantaged horses. I have hauled and moved a lot of horses that have come in with lice from neglect situations. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean the horse, if you see lice, that they are neglected, but they could have been in a stressed, disadvantaged situation. And so we've had fosters in the past, and they're like, oh no, my foster has lice, and the horse is still kind of rehabbing, or it's just in the herd that's kind of being not accepted. And they're worried every single horse will just be eat up with lice. And that has never been my experience. I've never seen a healthy horse that's thriving, non-stressed, with lice. I don't think Suzanna has either.
No.
And so we have run into it a little bit this month with this weather. And again, I have not seen them really thrive in a dry environment or a cold environment. But when you mix the heat and the wet, and this has been a really wet spring, you're going to see lice. And mites are less common, but I've had a lot of messages to me this spring with horses with mites presenting in unusual ways. Do you remember the one in the hoof?
Yeah, that was weird.
Like the hoof itself and around the hoof. It was even, I have seen a lot of mites on hooves and behind the heels, but this was unusual. Mites are much harder to get rid of. But if you're dealing with lice, and you can approach them all kinds of ways. I mean, you can bathe them just in lice shampoo. That can be for any species, really. You can address it with fly spray. We tend to not want to make them wet, and the weather often doesn't allow us to get them super. We can still have some really cold evenings, and we don't have hot water at the rescue at the actual facility. So we just do 7 dust.
If you do, though, wear a mask. 7 dust is very bad for people.
You don't want to breathe it. And you could say, well, then maybe my horse doesn't want to breathe it. So you can look at other options. You can also, and I tend to recommend going ahead and giving them an oral dewormer with ivermectin. And you can also do like flea and tick spot-on treatments. Some people have had some luck with that. I tend to just go for 7 dust. We've done it a lot. We've had good luck with that. It's simple. One treatment historically has always gotten rid of the lice. So if you have a horse in your herd right now, maybe it's a senior horse or they've been sick, the herd doesn't really like them, they're low pecking order horses, this is the kind of weather, if you're in our area, we're Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio, if you're in our area, I would go out and check. It's easy to miss them unless they really get out of control and kind of get them killed before you see millions of lice. But don't freak out and assume every horse has them. And they're also species specific. So you are not going to contract the lice yourself, and you're not going to have other animals that are not horses contracting the lice. But mites, they are a big pain in the butt.
I had a horse one time that got chicken mites because the rooster was roosting over top of the horse and dropping its mites on the horse.
Well, and so what she would have been having is the mites are getting on there. They can't set up and live on the
No, but they
animal,
sure
but
did make a mess.
They can be temporarily there. But actually the mites that we're talking about with horses, they embed and burrow into the skin, and they essentially, when you see mange on a dog, that's what you're seeing on the horses. They embed and burrow and make little tunnels and have little colonies that live under the skin, and it's disgusting. And often people don't realize what it is, and it doesn't matter unless you're treating it properly. You can put all kinds of things on them, and it's not a one-and-done treatment. It takes weeks or a month to get rid of mites. And mites are going to be more common when you have mud and warmth as well. Not nearly as common as lice, though, but a much bigger deal to get rid of. And you have to get creative. So, lime sulfur dip that you use for dogs, you can use. Now, again, it's hard on the skin, so you can't lime sulfur, in my experience, horses every day. You will just burn up the skin. And when you look for mites on horses, sometimes people think it's scratches around the bottom of the feet. And you have to look and see, are you seeing like flaking, thick scabs? And really, you can certainly scrape and have your vet test. But I will have vets that'll say, well, that's not mites. And it's almost always actually mites if you do a scrape. But I've seen them enough now that I do know what they are. So go ahead and, if you are worried about it, have your vet do a skin sample and scrape and test. But it MTG has a sulfur component, and sulfur is oil and sulfur are effective, but it's applying them like every third day. And you can also use like a lice type anti-parasitic shampoo. That's not a bad idea if you're in a situation where you can get them and clean the area great. But the thing is,
well, Dr. Hughes had me leave that on.
Well, and again,
she didn't want me to rinse it off.
Watching the skin, but that's the reason is it has to penetrate. They're not living on the surface of the skin.
Right.
They're deep in there, and it takes multiple treatments. I have also used with some success Spot on Dog treatments, good, like Frontline Plus, Advantage, and apply that around the top of the foot. I have also, my own horse had a big mite spot, and so the mites, it's not necessarily low pecking order horses. My horse is the top dog, and she had a spot that was probably 12 inches wide, 12 by 12 on her side, that was just a mite colony. And
she would.
But it took a month of consistent treatment. And so what we would do is kind of cover that in MTG, which I do love that product for all sorts of things, but some people hate the smell. I love the smell.
Well, also you can sunburn the hell out of your horses.
You can burn them.
Leave them outside.
And some horses just react to it. We have some thin-skinned thoroughbreds that you just couldn't put that on, but that sulfur component and the oil really soaks in. But that in and of itself still isn't enough to usually kill out the mites. So you can also... there was a product I have tried in the past, and again, some of this stuff is off-label. This is your discretion. This is what I have done, or we have done. We're not saying do it or not. I'm telling you that's what I've done. There was a product called Silence for cattle, and it was an incredible treatment for mites. I'm not positive that's still on the market. I don't raise cattle anymore, and I only have a few dairy goats. But when I had a herd of 50-plus dairy goats and dairy cattle, that product, Silence, with a C, was a great mite product. And so, if you're running into either of those, don't be surprised. Don't freak out. Mites, in a herd of 50 horses, maybe one horse will have mites at the most in a muddy, mucky winter. It's not something you're going to see spread, in my experience. If you do, you're the first person I've ever heard of. But that's something, just check. If you have one or two horses, you're in a dry area, neither of these things are likely to be a problem.
If they keep coming back, though, do check and make sure that you're keeping out a good quality loose mineral, because minerals do a lot for the skin barrier to fight off things like that, too. And that wraps into the disadvantaged horse. The disadvantaged horse could be the horse that doesn't have the right amount of minerals and vitamins, too.
And in goats, it was established that feeding a lot of zinc helped goats defend themselves against mites, which, there's not as much research in horses. But I know in goats that tended to struggle with mites, I would try to supplement heavily with zinc individually. Like I would give them zinc tablets. So it is something, there's almost always a nutritional component when a horse isn't thriving, or there could be a disease component as well, but we see a lot of nutritional, in the correctable instances, a lot of it's a nutritional issue. So that rolls well into our product of the month, and that is K.I.S, or K.I.S, Keep It Simple. It's from Thorn Bottom Farm, and there's multiple products, but it's essentially, it's a ration balancer in a mineral form. So I think it's a wonderful thing that you can offer to horses that have metabolic concerns. And they make a pellet They make like a loose, it's a loose mineral top dress. There's a gut product, and there's also a goat mineral product called Rumen Free Choice Loose Mineral. We have been using one of the flavored forage balancers that's the loose mineral at Mulligan Farm for probably 3 to 4 months. And Patrice, who's the company owner, has been great to work with, and she's donated some product to some of the horses in the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off that we felt would benefit most from the products. This is something that some listeners might find worthwhile exploring because they've stopped carrying, what is the product?
High-gain.
High-gain will no longer be in America. Is that right?
Because silly Americans couldn't catch on to that no-sugar food.
And so there's, this is a no-sugar line, and I like the way the product is designed. We like what's in the product, and we've been happy with it. If you've never used a product like this, it might seem pricey, but if you break down how much, so I think the 1 pound of what we use is $99, but it's like you're feeding 2 little scoops a day. So the product will go a long way. We have felt like we're not spending any more money on this as a forage balancer. So we're using this product on horses that tend to be easy keepers, and they're on primarily a forage-based diet, and just to make sure they're getting everything that they need. We use the selenium product. They do make a low or no selenium product. There's not a ton of places in America that are high selenium soil levels. We certainly are not in one, so we want that product. They make a new economy line that's more affordable if the cost is prohibitive. You can look at their economy line and see if that can work for you. And then we actually use the goat loose mineral available for the horses that are in stalls that are on grain and they're not needing a balancer, but we want to give them the access to that loose mineral. And I like the ingredients in all of their products. So Thorn Bottom Farm, K.I.S. Competitor would be like Vermont Blend, would be something similar. And we have used Vermont Blend, and we've moved to this. And this is much more palatable, and that's important because it costs, because we're buying a ton of it and feeding it to a lot of horses. What we were finding with the Vermont Blend is it wasn't as palatable, and so they weren't eating it out of the bucket. So we put it over a little bit of a little bit of a pellet just to carry it through. It's meant to be fed on its own. It's supposed to be palatable enough. We feed horses flax and vitamin E, so we need a little bit of a carrier. And so they don't leave this behind. None of the horses. None of the caretakers have mentioned them leaving this. And when you're thinking, well, 1 pound for $99, you don't want a tablespoon of that left in the bottom of a bucket. So
you want to go eat it yourself, just not to waste it.
We don't want to waste it. So I think this is a good product. We have a lot of, I wish we could, I know Suzanna feels very passionately about this, people that are overfeeding their horses but under nutritioning them.
Right.
You have these obese horses that aren't getting what they need. And frankly, that's something that humans are going through. That you have and dogs and stuff, but cats. But it's truly, you could be starving your horse of things like zinc and it be morbidly obese. Yeah. Tell them a little bit, without dwelling on this topic too long, just because there's so much to talk about, but a little bit about an obese horse, Rita.
Rita, yeah. So one of our fosters was having a whole lot of trouble with her one of our adopters was having a whole lot of trouble with her adopted horse. The horse was getting chewed to bloody pulp by the bugs. It was absolutely terrible. And she was really, really overweight, terrible high crest, just running on the edge of laminitis. Didn't really even, if you looked at her, you're like, she just doesn't look her best, even outside of the fat and the bug bites. She just wasn't like shiny looking. And it took me a while to get her, because her veterinarian kept prescribing cortisone and antihistamines and blah, 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 but the problem kept coming back. It took me a while to get her to come around to, hey, let's test your horse for zinc. And when the zinc testing came back, and her veterinarian said, well, I'll pull this test, but I don't think we're going to find anything out. Then her veterinarian called, she's like, holy crap, Terry, your horse doesn't hardly have any zinc at all, like it's almost a zero. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So we worked really hard on getting her diet balanced. She's lost a lot of weight. She's shiny. You know, the bugs don't attack her anymore. She's black again, because she had gone to sort of a red looking, funky looking orange horse. And the sad thing was is that I told her what to do to balance her diet out, but she wanted to get an equine nutritionist to weigh in on it, and she called an equine nutritionist who worked for a feed company, who recommended a product that didn't have any zinc in it at all, hardly any zinc in it at all, and a lot of iron in it, which would have pulled whatever zinc she was getting out. And so she called me back and she's like, I'm so discouraged. They told me the wrong thing. And so she did what I said, and the horse is lovely now.
Well, and I think, just keep in mind, there are certainly incredible equine nutritionists out there. But as we live in a world where if you're employed by a company that's selling a product, they're going to want to sell you the product often.
Right.
And I wish it wasn't that way. We're not selling you anything. We're not benefiting. Just the horses are. And while we're not equine nutritionists, we've been involved in the rehab, recovery, and the essentially the saving of about 1,300 horses. Very hands-on. So
one day we hope to have an equine nutritionist on the team.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to, like, somebody who's just really just telling you the facts without a product behind them. Even when we recommend products, I mean, it's just a product we've liked. So, funny enough, that rolls into our adoptable horse of the month, Dorian. And we've had Dorian, originally came into the rescue maybe 2000.
Riley was little.
15?
I don't know.
A long time ago. He was, he is now a 13-year-old quarter horse, I think probably standard-bred cross. Lovely animal. We love him. Suzanna is who did most of his rehab. He came to the main facility. He came to Mulligan, so it had to be 2016, because that's when we acquired Mulligan. And he came to Mulligan. He had a huge hole in his withers, and he was thin. He had been a guide's horse at a disreputable trail riding place in Fayetteville, and he had been seized with a Percheron mare and a little paint pony named Opie.
With a broken wanky.
Yeah, that had a broken wiener. We had to have amputated because, a combination of, he was a maniac for his feet, so they may have given him ACE, but stallions, when they're emaciated, often they'll lose the ability to retract their penis, and that's what happened to him. So Dorian came from a mess, and he came here to Suzanna. She got the hole in his withers healed up. And
gosh, that was an arduous journey.
And he just poor tack fit, and he was ridden by her daughter, who was very young at the time. Not even her daughter, who's the equestrian in the group, but
just the other one.
He ended up adopted and returned, and a lot of what happened with him will factor into our main topic that we'll get to a little later on. But the nutritional component factors, because Dorian came back hundreds of pounds overweight.
He was fat.
With terrible feet. Yeah. So the horse was being fed calories, but he wasn't getting the nutritional content he needed. And he also, being morbidly obese, was pretty uncomfortable. Eventually we ended up taking him to Haggard and finding that he had some fluid in his stifles. And that's the reason he's still adoptable. It's not a good reason, because he's an incredible horse. If you have the ability, if you're a good horse person with some boundaries, he loves people. He just will do anything for you. And so 13 years old, 15 hands, very attractive fella. Very personable fella. He does need either Prevocox or injections. We went ahead and injected the stifles with 200 and some pounds off of him, and his stifle's comfortable. He's a very pleasant boy. And we did the injections because when you move a horse around to fosters, it's easier to just have them injected. I would say Prevocox would work just fine, but right now his injections have him super comfortable. He wouldn't be suitable for ring work, but he is could be a great trail partner, and he's not scared of anything. And the only thing about Dorian, I presume this is because I think he's a quarter horse standardbred cross. He doesn't have a canter, and at his age, at 13, with the way things are, I don't think you're going to get a canter out of him, but he's perfectly happy to walk and trot. I mean, he'll canter a little in the field, but with a rider, he's just not. So if you want to walk, trot, safe trail horse, and you are a person with horse sense, very safe under saddle, and on the ground, if you give him boundaries, he believes them and he respects them. If you allow him to be a hippopotamus, then he will.
He believes he's a hippopotamus.
He believes he's a hippopotamus. he believes he's whatever you tell him he is, and he will act accordingly.
Right.
So, if you're gonna, let him get away with bad things, then he'll take advantage of your stupidity. So, he's adoptable. He is with a showcase trainer, so they're going to continue working with him. They've loved him so far, as his previous foster trainer did. And
my kid.
He will, they'll be setting an adoption fee on him probably any time. But he would be a great husband horse if you are a horse-savvy person, like to put your husband on and pack him down the trail. He's a sturdy fellow.
You do need to make sure his tack fits, though.
Yeah, we would certainly
It's really important.
We would certainly not want him to ever have any tack issues again, but we love him, so you can find Dorian on My Right Horse, or you can find him on Pet Finder under Heart of Phoenix. Moving into my personal favorite part of the podcast, the Ding-a-ling of the month.
Oh, we had 400 ding-a-lings this month.
We had too many ding-a-lings this month to pick one. So we're just going to...
It was a ding-a-ling month.
It was a ding-a-ling month.
National Ding-a-ling Month.
Yeah, that's May, moving forward.
May.
So with that, there was a certain type of ding-a-ling, we could say. The intolerant ding-a-ling to any views that didn't suit theirs about horse training.
Yes.
These people in May have been so intolerant to the belief system that there could be 2 types of training, let alone what we know to be true, 2,000 types of training that can work and be humane and be fair and make a safe horse who's a happy horse. We really experienced where it started was Jake Gelinas, who took Molasses for the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off. And let me tell you, the thing about Molasses right off is euthanasia has been talked about with her. She went into the event last year and didn't make any headway. Very early on, she was returned. And we had the trainer who comes to the rescue, Kaylin Mollahan. She worked with her some, and mostly I just said, let's just turn her out and let her just be a horse, and we will regroup at ATFO, and we'll see, Most of the interactions with her were pretty unpleasant at the rescue, but there weren't many. One being because she had an intense urge to bolt without any real indication as to when or what would cause it, and she meant to do it so aggressively. And when I say aggressive, not coming towards you, I mean like what she put a lot into the bolting. It would have been hard for the folks we had there to hold her. So I didn't want her to learn, hey, I can, get away and bolting is king. So we just kind of let her live her life with a few exceptions. Put her into the ATFO. And at the ATFO, we have a vet day. And this vet day went really, really, really long on Monday. That would have been, I think, April 29th.
Gosh, it went long.
And our vet ended up with some emergency calls. So he was trying to get what we had to have done because he could not come back the next day. And we didn't want to send horses out without things done. So Molasses decided, standing quietly in the aisleway with that she wasn't going to do it anymore.
Well, when he came at her with the needle.
Was it? So he walked up to her with
He
the needle.
walked up to her with the needle, and she said, "Nope."
Which is here's what I want to mention to this, that your vet is very happy to be alive, and we have a shortage of vets, so we don't need to discourage them or have them killed and make their job harder. So it's our responsibility to make sure that our animals can have vet care and that they can do it without killing the vet or killing anyone else. Well, Molasses wanted to kill other people, so Molasses bolted away.
Now, wait a minute. She didn't really want to kill other people. They just happened to be in the way of her leaving.
Though we've had horses that want to kill people.
We have, but
I mean,
not
and
her.
Molasses is indifferent. She's not really scared of people necessarily either, but she does, when she wants to get away, she wants to, and
It don't matter what's in her path.
So she bolted, ran over people and other horses. Multiple horses ended up getting away. And we're not entirely sure that that's not why there's a bunch of hawk swelling in one of the other competition horses, because we think he's the one that got away and went around to the other side, Owen.
Maybe.
And so caused a bunch of havoc. Ultimately, her being that way is why a couple of horses, the vet ran out of time and that they weren't able to get what they needed done that day. But it was a disaster, and it could have gotten someone killed, and it could have caused a lot of injury. But, and that was in a controlled setting and our vet's a real horseman and was set up and expecting to handle difficult horses.
So was the fella holding her.
Yeah, so was the person holding her. So that was a setup that was really setting her up for success, and it didn't work out. And our vet was like, he didn't think a lot of her after that. But anyway, that is the horse that caused all the controversy. Jake, and the funny thing about it is Jake is like a Liberty trainer anyway, and rides bridleless and trains horses with a Liberty approach. And so here he, he's making headway, keeping her from bolting. And I will say, if you're a person who hasn't experienced a bolting horse, or you don't know this horse, and you don't really have a lot of experience in general with troubled horses or difficult horses, the video, while I thought it was very well done, when I watched it, I mean, my thought was like, good job, Jake. And that was every single person within the organization thought. I could see that a sensitive person without a lot of experience, or somebody who has unrealistic belief systems and rose-colored glasses, could have been got their bloomers wadded up. But here's the thing. You could totally disagree with the video, and you can ask questions and be like, well, that's not how I would have done it. That's fine. But what was happening, and what was to me so unfortunate, was the aggressive, single-minded tunnel vision of there is only one way, and only R+ training is the answer. It's the answer for everything. There's never been another answer. If you don't do R+ training, then you're certainly going to hell, and we won't even put you in a handbasket.
Well, I mean, the one person flat out said that you call yourself a rescue and you're letting that fella ruin a horse.
Yes, and here's the thing. I am not sensitive, but what happens is that's how you discourage trainers. And here's the thing. He's an excellent trainer, and certainly not ruining anyone. And even you can still even think that, but to feel so free with your opinion that you would demonize a young man that had driven 16, 17 hours to pick up a horse to train for free. And then one of the Ding-a-lings were like, I'm sorry, you can't afford to pay your trainers. No, ma'am, we just have hundreds of trainers over the years that have offered the training for free because we're exemplary. That's actually why. So that's why. But it was just...
she said we got the bottom of the barrel trainers because we don't pay them.
Yeah, and it's like we
have some really top-notch trainers.
We have some incredible trainers. Trainers that have been to impress Monty Roberts when we've sent them out there. So, but, it was just the willingness to be a nasty, belligerent, tunnel vision person is prevalent in society across all kinds of topics.
Well, then to top it off, she lied. She said we were embarrassed by our video and we removed it, and it was still there.
Yeah, it was still there. We would certainly never remove a video that we believed in and felt like we would post to begin with. But But it was, we were talking about it, and one of our board members, Stephanie, who never chimes on anything like
No,
controversial.
she's so good at staying out of crap.
She's like, it almost got me. It almost got me to comment. And really, she said, and her thing was that you disagree and don't even like the video. That's fine. I mean, there are types of training that trainers we work with use that I don't like personally. I don't necessarily, and I don't have to like it. And I don't mean because it's abusive. It's just, I think I would have done it this way. But
because you train a lot of
because
horses.
I train a lot of horses, though sometimes I've been pushed to think that would have made it simpler. But what this board member, her issue was that the intent to shame the other trainer,
that
was despicable. And here's the thing: it just tells me all you need to know about a person. I don't care how well you train. If you're a nasty person, then I don't want you training. And so that was certainly the people that were on there. And there weren't a ton, but it was mostly friends of that particular person. And most people really thought it was excellent because it was. But it was just in the horse world to believe that only one approach is right and to be willing to try to be cruel to a trainer who does something different. That just has to stop. We have to develop a mindset that if somebody acts that way, that's unacceptable. We're not going to move forward with that person. We're not going to, whatever product they're selling, we're just not going to buy into it. And here's the thing. I mentioned this on a live stream I did. If you're selling a program, then I'm immediately suspicious. You're selling me a product and telling me only you have the answer. Well, that's a scheme. You aren't the only one with the answer. The way you do it's not the only way, and you're not the only person that can package and sell it to me. And we are just in a special position because of the number of horses we've dealt with. And there was, the mindset of, well, you're a rescue, so you just have to take what you can get. No. We do exactly what we believe in. So that's what we do. And we have a lot of options, more options than any individual is going to have.
Which makes it really nice because we have some horses that this person's training program would be fantastic for, but that person's training program would actually perpetuate the horse's problems. But on the other hand, this horse might go to that one and be fine and not the other one. We have all these trainers that we can pick from and say this is who this horse needs, but that's not who that horse needs.
Well, and that's the thing that is, I guess the takeaway that I would want a listener to have is there is never one approach that works for all horses. Please don't let somebody selling you a program or their book or their video convince you that their way is the way for all horses. And there's no such thing. The number of horses we've dealt with and the times we sit down and say, so-and-so is a great trainer and they have this horse for us and they're not the right fit for this horse. So we need to move them and get them a different horse, or before the horse ever goes, ideally. But sometimes you just don't know who the horse totally is until they're with a trainer. And say, this horse over here that's waiting in a stall for a trainer would be great there. But this horse would not be. And it's because there is no one size fits all. No more than there's one size bloomer that fits all people for them to get bunched up. There is not one size.
Depends on
training.
How much bunching you want to do. If you want to do a lot of bunching, you need big bloomers.
Well, but these people had to have some big bloomers. So and I think so. If you have a horse and you say you've done, let's really trigger people. Say you've done Pirelli, and that tends to really trigger people. But say you've done it and it worked for your first horse, and now that horse has gotten Cushing's and now it's become unmanageable, and now you've had to put that first horse to sleep, and you've gotten another horse and you don't understand, you're frustrated. Why is this not working? Why is this not working? Well, because it doesn't work for every horse. So don't be afraid. Don't be so married to your ideals that you hurt horses.
I like to say, watch all these trainers and put the tools in your toolbox. And then when your favorite tools aren't working, you go and get your backup tools or your tools that you keep in the bottom drawer or whatever, because sometimes those are really useful.
Yeah, we were fixing fence, me and Nelson. He came out to the rescue to work with some of the caretakers on some horsemanship, and he was helping fix, or he was primarily fixing, and I was helping on some high tensile.
I'm glad you reworded that.
Yeah, on some high tensile, and we had to get creative because the tools that were listed for crimping
Oh, yeah.
weren't crimping the way they needed to. So be flexible. If you're not flexible, you're just going to hurt your horse, and it's fine to like a certain trainer's approach and to hope that that could work for the horses you have because that fits you and that's more your style. But don't, if you think that a horse, and we covered this on the last episode, but a horse not being comfortable and feeling 100% secure about a situation, and a horse feeling some pressure, those are parts of nature, and they need to be able to do those things just like we as humans do, or when we're raising children. So if you think that everything has to be beautiful and positive, you're going to cause a lot of damage. And you're going to get someone hurt, and you're going to end up getting your horse hurt, really. That's the biggest thing. Your horse is going to suffer a lot if it ever leaves your hands, but you could really get someone hurt, your vet, your farrier, a casual visitor. So, don't, if you're worried that your horse has ever had one thing it might in its brain have felt unpleasant, you've not watched a herd dynamic very many times.
Or taking them on a trailer ride, because trailer rides are actually very uncomfortable for horses.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of was a lot of the. It's funny. This is what was this month because it fit a lot of what we talked about. If those Ding-a-lings had just listened to our podcast last month.
Oh, well, we erased our podcast last month because it embarrassed us.
Is that
just kidding?
Something we would never do.
Never do.
So that rolls on into our main topic, which is turning a horse into a killer. This actually is inspired by Dorian and a little bit by, by what happened with molasses. But the roots of this story go way far back. I think I wrote the blog, Turning a Beginner-Safe Horse into a Killer, which was read by millions of people through the blog and on Facebook in maybe 2014 or 15. Probably 2015, and if you ever
cracks me up, you could just jerk these dates out of your head like that.
But
I have lots of talents, but jerking dates out
that's
of my
mine.
head is not
I can pull the date. I know when it happened.
I'm not a date jerker.
It's numbers. Remember, it's numbers.
I'm
you
not
can't not the numbers
person.
So turning a horse into a killer. This could mean a horse that's been very safe that you frustrated to no end, and now it starts flipping over backward because of the way you've ridden it unfairly, and it's taken all the torture it can stand, and now it's going to flip over and kill you. It could be a horse that was feral, that you gave no choices to, and you frustrated it to where maybe you've created a bolting issue. Maybe it wasn't going to be a bolter, but you've given the horse no option. Maybe it's a horse that wanted to bolt by nature, and now you've oogie-woogied it to death, and it knows it can bolt. Now it bolts every time anything needs done. The farrier comes, you need to lead it, you need to put it in a trailer. The answer is bolting because there have been no boundaries.
Or the horse that was feral that you shoved into a corner without doing any prep work, and you've turned it into a fighting killer.
Yeah, I mean,
that's fighting, biting killer.
Yeah, you gave the horse no options, and now instead of it having a flight, it's went into fight, and it'll come over top of you and get you by the throat and fling you. That happens, let me tell you.
Yes, it does.
Or it's a
bucket-fed oogie woogie baby thing
that eats and paws, and now it paws the farrier and rears, and so it could be anything. Specifically, when I wrote the blog, the photo, if you go to heartoffphoenix.org and you look up the title, I think Turning a Beginner-Safe Horse into a Killer. You look that up, there's a photo of an emaciated Clydesdale cross with like 5 kids on his back. And so in his case, they got him when he was a skeleton and he didn't have the energy to fight, and they just wore him down. And then when he felt good, he's like, I've had enough of this. And he was pretty belligerent and pretty unsafe. But the backstory, so with Dorian, in his case, it was taking a horse that had good boundaries and letting him get really heavy, really uncomfortable, putting him in arena work, not listening to the fact he wasn't comfortable, and his no was pulling back and letting him pull back. But I think the beginning issue was not listening to I'm not comfortable, and probably getting him really frustrated by being uncomfortable. And then spoiling him on the other side. So being unfair and then spoiling them. And then so a lot of mixed signals. So he was returned by an adopter after years being called dangerous. Not a dangerous horse by any stretch, though. So maybe also somebody could use the label dangerous and the horse isn't actually dangerous. But any horse can be. I mean, any horse can kill you accidentally. But in his case, it was more of a label, but the horse had some frustrated behaviors.
Well, I mean, he was dangerous in that he learned to fly backwards out of the horse trailer. He broke someone's arm doing that, so.
Yeah.
But that was a created problem.
So, and that flying back out of the horse trailer, do you know, up at Equine Affair, when I would mention that about him, you know, every person I mentioned it to, they said, well, my horse does that too. And I was horrified.
Oh, my gosh.
Every person. I bet you 20 people. It wasn't that, you know, I said, you know, he's not doing it now. I said, but it's in there. You know, you could allow that to surface if you're not aware. And they're like, it's not a problem. My horse does that too. And, you know, we very rarely. So I know that's a situational thing where you're creating it every time, because we have to have loaded a lot of horses that had to do that too, that we simply aren't having that experience. So, guys, it is not normal for your horse to fly out of the horse trailer. That's correctable. I'm not going to cover that on this podcast, but get some help, some good help for that, because that is so dangerous. That is you turning a horse into a killer. So, you know, so it is deeply rooted in a horse once they learn a thing. So,
but the answer to get them to not fly out of the trailer is not to have someone stand in the front with a bucket of feed while you shut the doors so they can't fly out of the horse trailer. That's not how to fix it.
Though, I will say, while that is not an extremely skilled clicker trainer, and this is an instance if a horse has a lot of anxiety, somebody might have a solution where clicker training and making that a spot where they're comfortable, because it can be.
Oh, I think that would work.
That could work, you know. So
not
I mean,
just standing there randomly.
Just so people know,
them.
There are situations where I can see it done very well by a very skilled person. That could be a way to solve that. There are various ways, and I actually have gone over that with Dorian's previous foster at Black Star Stables. You know, I told them 3 or 4 things that, you know, to try, and you know, the last few times he was hauled, he did not. He had let that go. But
using the right pieces of equipment, too.
Yes. Here's the thing, like knowing the horse could have the behavior and preparing yourself ahead of time before you get into a fight or before the horse has even had time to do it, I think is very wise. And so those were some of the things I did mention. So with Dorian, what he would do, and it depends on what kind of, you know, trailer, but again, preparing, like we haul in stock trailers and they all have a cut gate. Dorian would not come out of the trailer until you had clipped him. So I said, don't let him even get to the point that he thinks that makes sense. When you're walking him in, and again, this is in a training setting. There are people who don't even want to be in the trailer when the horse is. They want to learn to send the horse in. That's down the line. But, you know, I said close the door the minute he steps on the trailer half willfully. You know, and he's going in, go ahead and close it. He can't get out. He knows that he can't. He's going to see that. So that's step one. You can do it that way. You know, ideally, yes, I want the door to be able to be open and him stand there quietly. But also, we are often in situations where the horse has to be moved. So what can we do to make it low stress, safer, and to make that behavior not ever even take place?
The other important thing is to know your limitations, because, you know, I've never been a very strong person to begin with, and then I got both of my arms messed up, and then I lost some more of that ability, and then I had breast cancer and lost all of my chest muscles. So now I absolutely know that the worst thing that I could possibly do is take a horse who hasn't had much handling and put it in a situation where it might learn it can get away from me. So I still work with feral horses, but I work with them in a stall where they can't get away from me. There's the days of me taking them out in the big round pen.
But when you
whatever,
say can't get away from me, so the people listening, because
so they're not bolting away from me.
Yeah, like
I don't want to teach
you
a horse
want to
have
give them an option
problem.
to come, but that I just want people to understand that.
Yeah,
part.
I don't want them to learn that they can bolt away from me because 7 years ago when a minor bolting try happened, if I had a rope halter on, I could have stopped it. Now I can't stop it because I have a lot of physical limitations now. So know your limitations. If you can't, then just don't.
Well, and I think we'll get messages where we give a solution and the person says, well, I don't understand that, or I can't. If you are going to own horses, you need to be able to get access and afford and transport a horse to someone who can help you if you run into an issue. Don't keep creating what then becomes a deeply rooted problem with a horse because you keep trying and not succeeding, but you're unwilling or potentially financially or logistically unable to get the right help and then pass the horse off. We've gotten, and that probably, I don't know if anybody would know better than a rescue that has handled a ton of horses, what it feels like to get a horse that has a created problem. People will say, I bet you see some really terrible things. We have seen a ton of starvation, but the thing we see more than anything is a spoiled horse with a created problem. That's more than anything. The horses that are turned over, and there may be some neglect also, but the biggest neglect is that of their mind and mishandling and creating a horse that is dangerous, pushy, shovey, rude, unable to have basic things done because they've been coddled. We don't get a lot of horses that have had people that are mean to them in a traditional sense. Very rare.
No, not usually.
It's very rare. You can easily see they have been spoiled and coddled, even if they're thin. Even in the cases where the horses haven't been fed enough or their feet are neglected, they still will run you right over because they've been allowed to do it. So, and that is, it's much easier to fix the weight of a horse than it is to fix the mind of a horse that has been ruined through being spoiled. And we've had plenty of horses come through that have been ridden unfairly. So, like if the horse is under saddle, there's a lot of unfairness that has probably happened there, we find. But on the ground, you guys are spoiling your horses to death. The reason a horse ends up in an auction feedlot is one of two things usually. It's become belligerent on the ground and what people consider not worth training, or it has a health condition that's going to be not fixable.
Or it's an unhandled stallion that you wanted your child to watch be born and then never did anything with.
But that's the same thing. On the ground, you've let the horse go.
Yeah.
So that is a topic that I just feel so passionately about because we are who's fixing that. We are who go out and get the horse. And people will say, well, I want to turn...
what's really discouraging? When we send people out to help a person fix a thing, and then the person gives them the roadmap of how to keep the thing fixed, and then the person who needed the roadmap in the first place
throws it away.
Throws the map away and just goes off label, and the horse goes right back to what we've spent our resources and time sending a person to help fix the thing.
And
so
that is honestly, if you're listening, that has happened a lot.
It's very discouraging.
Go and fix it and show them.
Will you come and help me? Oh, that was great. Oh, well, I'm just going to do it like
I'm going to go back to doing what I always did. We've got to get away from that because it's so, and again, that comes back to being so bent on the way you were doing a thing that even recognizing it doesn't work, still holding on to it. And again, that can go into all kinds of parts of life. But you can't do that. If Heart of Phoenix did that, we wouldn't have helped near the number of horses. There wouldn't be near the number of horses in homes. And I just simply early on knew that idealism was not for us. And that said, we're going to wrap this up and go move some feral horses.
Oh boy.
We're going to move some feral horses. If anybody out there is looking for a 2-year-old little quarter horse project, we'll throw you in the whippersnapper division for the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off. If you're interested and you qualify, you can put an application in. Despite rumors, we don't accept every trainer application that comes in. So if you don't get accepted, don't get your feelings hurt, go back and learn some more and try again next year. But that's it for episode 5. We will be, hopefully, next time be able to talk to you about that project with that Andalusian that is out in Lexington, and hopefully that goes well and it leads to being able to do that across the country and help educate some folks on how to gentle ferals in a kind, sensible way.
Yes.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.